Hi, I'm Paul Peterson. I'm at Education Next, and I'm here with Rick Hanushek, a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution here at Stanford University. And we're going to talk about Rick's new study of principles, which has just been released by Education Next. And so, Rick, I know you've done a lot of work about teacher effectiveness, and you have made it very clear that if you have an effective teacher in the classroom, kids learn a lot more. So, but I thought the principal only worried about the hallways. So you have clean hallways if you have a good principal. But now, what's your finding here on principals?
Well, this is a study of Texas schools that Greg Branch and Steve Rivkin and I did. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that principals are important, some of which are the principals who walk around with a baseball bat and keep order in the hallways. Others are the inspired leader and so forth. There's been very little systematic, in fact, virtually no systematic research on what is the impact of a principal.
Well, it sounds to me like it's almost impossible to do this. How did you solve the problem of studying the effect of a principal on how much kids learn? That sounds really, really tough to do.
Well, it's helped out because we're in Texas where we could look at 14,000 different principals over a 6-year period in the multitude of schools in Texas. And we tried a variety of different ways. The trick, as you're obviously hinting at, is how do you separate out the principal from all the other things going on in the schools? And what we found, what we did in the simplest terms is to take a given school and look at what happens after the principal changes. You bring a new principal.
So you look at an old principal and a new principal, and does anything happen as a result?
Exactly.
But maybe you brought in the new principal because the old principal was doing a terrible job.
There's all kinds of concerns, and it's a very tricky question, as you point out. It could also be that some school districts are good at hiring good principals so that the new principal doesn't look very much different than the old one. What we found was startling in terms of the impact of a principal. The lowest, the smallest, most conservative estimate we get suggests that a good principal compared to an average principal can, in 1 year, move the kids in the school from the 50th to the 52nd percentile. But that's every kid in the school that the principal can do in a given year. Imagine doing that several years in a row, and all of a sudden you see that a good principal is really worth a lot.
So it's not so much that it has a huge effect immediately on any one kid, but that a principal is affecting a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids in this school building, and a 2% shift, a 2 percentile shift, when you look at it affecting all these kids, that's a big time thing.
Precisely. When we look at teachers, we find that individual teachers can have a bigger impact than that in a given year. But we're talking about all of the teachers across the whole school. And that's part of the secret, by the way. As far as we can tell, good principals tend to, one way or another, get a better stock of teachers. They tend to push out poor teachers and to bring in better performing teachers.
Oh, so that's the mechanism that you seem to be identifying.
There are hints of that. This research is preliminary and needs some more work, but it appears that, among other things, principals do a good job at who the...
Well, there are these famous stories of a principal who will spend 2-3 years of their life getting rid of a terrible teacher, because that's what you have to do in a lot of states, where you've got collective bargaining agreements and all kinds of protections. And so, yeah, this would take a very committed principal to have to remove a teacher under some circumstances.
Part of that leads to some of the questions, too. If the principal only gets a better group of teachers by pushing the bad ones over to another school, the whole system isn't better off. But if, in fact, the principal can convince a bad teacher that she or he is better placed in another job, then we're better off. So there's still lots of open questions, but the bottom line is simply it looks like leadership in schools is really important, and that having good leaders and getting rid of bad leaders makes a big difference.
Well, you know, to the ordinary man on the street, they would say, of course, what's so new about this? So what do you say to somebody who says, I always knew the principal was the most important person at the school. We've known this for a long time. So what's new here?
What's new is that we're trying to both quantify how big the impact of a good teacher is, of a good principal, but we've also tried to look at things like backgrounds and so forth in the same way that we've looked at teachers. And what we find, again, is that it's not the credentials or the training that a principal went through, but some people are just better at it than others. And so we have to think about systems that can be used to keep the good ones and not keep the bad ones.
So you'd say it's easier to pick a good principal than to train one?
Absolutely.
Good talking with you.
Thanks.